Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional.
Hello, welcome to the Unapologetically Sensitive podcast. I am not Patricia. My name is Jen Perry. And before I really realized what I was getting myself into, I offered to be a guest solo host on the podcast tonight. Patricia and I were planning on recording together, and she had some things that were calling her away and making us recording together a little stressful for her. So I'm not sure what I've gotten myself into here, but I am going to do my best here for a little while. Thank you for spending some time with me. Before we get too far, I want to say thank you to Patricia for all she does for this podcast, on this podcast, for all of us. I don't know about you guys, but I can definitely feel the love coming through and her passion. She pours a lot of her heart and soul into this podcast. And so, Patricia, thank you. Thank you for all you do. I got to tell you, this is my maybe third or fourth take. So I've got like mad respect for you showing up and doing this the way you do. We did hit some bumps today, everything from logging in to me, I guess, having some stops and starts about what to talk about. I don't do this by myself. I've only ever done it in conversation. And, as a therapist, I'm always in conversation. So I'm finding it a little bit unnerving to be here by myself. So we'll see how this goes. I'm sure I'm about to make every podcasting mistake or error, whatever we want to say. And I guess a little bit about my gremlins that shows up about, is this going to be any good? It's very uncertain. I'm not sure what's going to come out of my mouth. Breathing through with some of that and trusting that it's going to be okay. I have ADHD and often have 15 thoughts going at once. There was a meme I resonated with on Facebook that said, I don't have one train of thought. I have 15 trains of thought all going in different directions and all the conductors are screaming. So I'm going to try to get through some of this without subjecting you to some of that craziness that's in my brain, but it does help me anyway to be able to just kind of put out some gremlins out there, right? Be like, hey, I see you guys. I see you guys telling me that I'm not good enough or I don't know what I'm doing. And actually, that one's not that far off the mark. I really don't know what I'm doing, but there is only one way to learn how you're doing. So a little while ago, I was texting with Patricia and letting her know that I had given it a couple of goes and kind of choked and wasn't feeling good about what I had put down and that I was going to eat dinner and come back. So I think as an HSP, actually anybody, I don't know, this is HSP territory. One thing that's helped me immensely push through things that would otherwise immobilize me is just by owning them, just by lowering that bar of expectations on myself and giving myself permission to just be utterly human. And I respect you, the listener. And if you've had enough, you can certainly check back on episode, what's this? This is 129. So 130, Patricia will be back, I promise. But to name those gremlins and be unapologetic about them, right? Be unashamed because we all have them, especially in our society with all of its perfectionism. So I'm letting myself off the hook, and I would invite you for maybe the next 15 minutes, perhaps the next hour or day, to welcome your own humanness right here along with me. Will you? I think we'd all be a lot better off. So today was fun in that regard. I let her know that I'm having some learning curves and that I can welcome them. I've long since embraced a growth mindset, as they say. That's a wonderful book. It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck, and it really talks about the difference between having a fixed mindset, where you've either got talent for something or you don't, and a growth mindset where you can get in, be willing to do something, perhaps poorly for a little while, before you grow into being able to do it well, which is the natural way of things. Life is exceedingly generous that way. If you can focus on doing what you love and you're willing to do it and stumble through it, life is generous. I get better at doing things with some heart and some openness. That's what I tell my kids. Like, just show up with an open heart. Boundaried, not stupid open, but an open heart, a curious heart, a compassionate heart. If there was one thing I did want to talk a little bit about, I'd like to make a case for self-compassion over self-esteem. Worried about our self-esteem. Not all of us have a very stable sense of self-esteem. And as I was thinking about it, I'm not sure that we're meant to, given that we're always in context. I watch my kids, I watch myself. Something that goes really well, my self-esteem feels pretty good, feels pretty high. And something doesn't go so well, it can plummet. And given that often that sense of ourselves is formed early in childhood with what's reflected back at us, which, depending on our caregivers and their stress and what they might have been going through, it can often be a bit inconsistent. So to me, self-esteem is, for me, an inherently unstable construct. It goes up and down depending on what's going on around me and who I'm with and how they're able to receive me or not. Often when I'm talking with clients or I'm reflecting on myself, that those moments of low self-esteem, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Can really be tracked back to attachment dynamics. I know for me, I always felt like a disappointment to myself, to others, so when I'm like, gosh, what's wrong with me? Why am I always having such a hard time with disappointment? Instead of just checking off, oh, well, that must be low self-esteem, I think it's a lot more fruitful to see how I can track it back to an attachment dynamic that was laid down early on when we are definitely not very conscious of, not very critical of how we are taking in information in early childhood. So self-esteem, my case is for self-compassion, because self-compassion and self-compassion exercises, and I can go over those in a minute, can be very, very robust. If we can dedicate ourselves to a self-compassion practice, that can always be there for us. So a couple of my favorite self-compassion practices, and a lot of these come from Kristin Neff, who is right now, I would say, our lead researcher on self-compassion. I love her work. So some of these will come directly from her. The simplest one, though, that I'm thinking of, when I'm in a moment of very human confusion or upset or frustration or irritability, or however it might be showing up for me on any given day, I stick my hand right on my heart and I breathe. I can feel the warmth from my hand, and I can just slow everything down for a second. All right, that's a pretty simple practice, very accessible. You don't have to find a lucky rock or crystal in your pocket or anything. It's just right there, taking that breath, taking a moment, slowing everything down. I run a self-compassion group for women, and one of my participants put it so beautifully that a lot of our experiences are so raw, and our emotional reactions can be so raw. And when we hold them against the warmth of our heart, it's like they soften. kind of like vegetables being cooked, and they soften and they're more easily held and more easily digested. And where I go right after here is right into curiosity. Like, what is this? What is going on here? I'm this human being. I'm freaking out about something, and can I greet myself with some curiosity and kindness? Which counteracts what usually tends to happen, which is we tell ourselves some horrible story about what's happening, either about ourselves or the other person. Brene Brown has a great video about blame. And I experienced this once sitting on my sofa in my living room. And this was a while ago. I was very, very angry at my husband at the time, and alternately very, very angry at myself. And we had had some kind of disagreement, and it was almost like a pinball machine. I kept bouncing very quickly between things that were his fault and then throwing it back on myself and all the things that were my fault. And if we can get curious, if we can see conflict as an invitation to deepen intimacy, if we can bring curiosity and kindness. How did you experience that? Because that was really different than what I just experienced. That conflict can lead to intimacy. Into me you see. I love that. I love playing with words. I'm such a nerd. Into me you see. Intimacy, right? If we can just pause and take a moment. And you don't necessarily have to be in a conflict with another person to do that. I mean, I do. I have plenty of inner conflicts that I can bring this practice to. One of my favorite quotes is, I am human and therefore nothing human is foreign to me. So counteracting this idea that we have to be perfect or should be perfect. We live in a society that's crazy with it, all the perfection. So being able to be with ourselves and be curious about what it is we're experiencing. What angle, what facet, what aspect of being human am I experiencing right now? Because I'm human and therefore nothing human is foreign to me. It's all something I can be curious about and allow. I don't have to push it away. That's a beautiful mantra from Kristin Neff. Soften, soothe, and allow. Can I soften to myself, to this moment? Can I let myself be soothed for the moment, slow everything down, soften, soothe, and allow in a moment of upset? So, it's funny, I just totally lost my train of thought there. I get so excited talking about the self-compassion exercises. So my apologies if this is a little bit disjointed. But overall, that self-compassion practices are more robust than worrying about our self-esteem. Oh, see? Okay, I just got it back. With that saying, I'm human and therefore nothing human is foreign to me. And embracing that and whatever we may be experiencing with kindness and curiosity. We don't do this to other animals or trees or beings, right? Like you wouldn't walk up to a tree and say, you're not being tree enough. Go to a horse and say, you're not being horsey enough. What's wrong with you? So a lot of the self-compassion exercises really combat and are designed to kind of reverse or flip the script or turn the energy around what really is at its heart a lot of self-violence. The stories that we tell ourselves, the interpretations we make about ourselves, about others, about the world around us can be so unkind. And I think we kind of like the certainty and the protection of that. Like, I got it figured out and everybody else is just, I'm not allowed to curse on the podcast, but I would have some choice words to use right now. We're just stopping all that in its tracks. And I ask myself, what is the most honest but generous story I can tell right now about myself and about others? Because remembering, of course, as bewildered and messy as we are, so is everybody else. I love internal family systems for this because that model of psychotherapy, psychospiritual therapy, the basis of the model is that we're all made up of parts. We have parts that are very defensive. We have parts that act like small children, right? We have beautiful parts, manager parts that run our lives. So depending on what part of me is the most present, sometimes you get the most grown up part of me. Other times, you might get a very belligerent teenager in there. So we're all made up of different parts, and we may interact with each other's parts, and we're not always coming from the place of the highest perspective we can hold or the most generous heart that we can offer ourselves and others. So the self-compassion practices, again, they're designed to kind of work with and help direct some of our more fight or flight, primitive type of responses. And by primitive, I mean, I'm not meaning to throw them under the bus here. Like, I want that system working well for me in the face of a real threat. But some of our threats these days are pretty abstract. So we get into this echo chamber of our own heads, thinking really negatively about things. So one other self-compassion practice that I want to give you is the self-compassion break, and it's in 3 parts. The first part is mindfulness, really. It's meeting whatever the moment is kind of head on. Often for me, this first step, and I use this when I'm in pain. I use this when I'm triggered. I use this when I get really upset about something. And I'll sit down or stand or take that breath, put my hand on my heart, and try to meet the moment head on. And by head on, I mean with mindfulness, with bare attention. And I try and stay really in the middle here. So what I mean by in the middle is I try not to minimize the experience. Let me see if I can think of an example. So I have 2 kids. I love them to pieces. I love them, love them, love them. And they drive me crazy sometimes. So when I'm having like that mom moment, and the mom moment that you're not proud of, even though really under your skin, you're about to lose it, I don't minimize that. I don't try and sweep it under the rug. I don't try to push it away. I meet it head on, but I also don't exaggerate it either. I don't go into self-pity or why aren't I better at this or torturing myself. Often what I do is right when my hand goes on my heart, I'll say something like, ouch, ouch, this hurts. I just keep it really, really simple. Sometimes it's helped just to locate it in your body, whatever the sensation you're feeling, that gets you out of your head and out of the story a little bit. So that's step 1. Step 1 is just to really be with the moment head on without exaggerating it or minimizing it. Step 2 is really just realizing that you're not alone in this moment. You're not alone. There's people on your block probably going through something similar in your neighborhood, in your city, in your state, across the world, right? You're not alone in this moment. Whatever it is you're experiencing, because you're human and nothing human is foreign to us, what you are experiencing, I promise, no matter how out there it seems, you are not alone. A lot of the time we're given the illusion that we're there alone because we don't talk to each other about our difficulties. Remember that perfectionistic culture? One of the biggest blessings about my job as a therapist, in many ways, I'm a secret keeper. So I hear everybody's secrets, and I know that we're just not talking about them, but we're all walking around with really similar human struggles. Sure, the details may be unique, but the themes are so universal. So we're kind of reaching out to the fact that this is a very human experience, whatever it is, and certainly, losing it on your kids and being driven crazy. I mean, talk to any mom, any parent. The third step is really just opening it up. And I use the loving kindness mantra for this, and I believe Kristin Neff does too. It's a simple wish for all of us. May we all take that deep breath. Traditionally, the metta prayer is, may we all be happy, may we all be healthy, may we all be free from suffering, may we all be free. But you can really riff on those as long as it's that, in that direction. May we all take a deep breath. May we all not strangle our kids today. No, I'm just kidding. But may we all try to find the humor in the situation. May we all reach out to each other with open hearts. May we be kind. And it's a little different. It's not just for you, but you're included in this, but you're wishing it for everybody that you felt connected with in that second step. I don't know about you guys, but for me, sometimes it's easier, much, much easier to encourage a friend or be able to go and do something for a friend I swear I talk in memes these days. There was another meme that was like, there's certain things that I can't get up and go do for myself, or I won't. But if my friend wants ketchup, or, there's something wrong with what she just ate, I'll be the first one to chase down a waiter to fix it on someone else's behalf. So I think it kind of comes up on that energy of wanting our friends and our loved ones to be happy. And then it gets a little easier to include us in that. And the last thing I want to leave you with is how self-compassion has helped me loosen up a lot with my self-defensiveness. So it used to be if anybody criticized me, I would go right into defensiveness, which of course means I'm not hearing the other person, and then I'm not getting close to them because I'm not allowing myself to see into them and their experience because, well, maybe my self-esteem is a little too fragile for that. So self-compassion has really helped me because I have a safe place to land now in my own heart. That when I need to hear feedback from the people I love, when my son tells me what it was like for him. In fact, that's become one of my favorite parenting questions now is I'll ask my kids after a particularly messy encounter, what was that like for you? And because I have enough self-compassion built up, I don't have to go straight to self-defensiveness. I can actually be a safe place for my own self to land. And I can look at myself a little more honestly, a little less defended, a little less defensively. And that's, from my experience, it's been directly correlated with my ability to practice self-compassion, which is just building a friendliness, a commitment to stop any self-violence, and approaching myself with friendliness, with curiosity, kindness, compassion. So I guess this concludes episode 129 of the Unapologetically Sensitive podcast. Thank you for sticking it out with me here for my first solo guest podcast. Thank you, Patricia, for trusting me with your baby tonight. I hope I did okay. And just a couple of things in Patricia's tradition of kind of asking you there at the end, what do you think? Would you be willing to give self-compassion practices a try? See if you can build them in your life. What are your thoughts on self-esteem and how stable or how unstable a construct it feels like and how it works in your life? Remembering that there's no wrong answers here, right? It's just you being authentically human with your experience, with your human experience. So be curious if you have any thoughts. My name again is Jen Perry. I can be reached at jen@heartfulnessconsulting.com. And I was happy to be here with you today. So remember that sensitivity is your superpower. Good night.